afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees public hearing. Today is June 13th, 2023. The time is approximately 4:30 p.m. Mr. Burning, may we please have a roll call?
Yes, Ms. Davis. Mr. Burning?
Present.
Mr. Harlow?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
Thank you. Okay, so there are two cases on the agenda for tonight's meeting. ZC 2023-001 is a text amendment, and ZC 2023-003, reference 6300 Daly Road. We are going to begin with case number ZC 2023-003, reference 6300 Daly Road. In both cases, Ms. Kennedy will present the staff report. The board will ask any questions of staff regarding the staff report. The applicant will have an opportunity to present. The board will ask any questions of the applicant. There will be an opportunity for opponents who would like to speak, then an opportunity for proponents who would like to speak. Then we will close the public portion of the board's deliberation. Are there any questions about the order of the public hearings? Thank you. So at this time, I will turn this portion of our hearing over to Ms. Kathleen Kennedy.
Thank you, Trustee Dukes Davis. So the first case, we're going to go a little out of order on the agenda this evening. The first case we're going to consider tonight is case ZC 2023-003, 6300 Daly Road. The applicant is seeking approval under the Springfield Township zoning resolution for a zoning map amendment from R4 Multiple Family Residence District to RPUD Residential Planned Unit Development. The applicant is Mr. Robert Sanders of Sanders Development Group, 1941 Ray Street, Suite 102, Cincinnati, Ohio 45202. The property owner is Daly Creek Investment Group, LLC, at 6300 Daly Road. The location, again, is 6300 Daly Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45224, Book 590, page 0210, parcel 0283, Section 19, Township 3, Range 1. The site description and surrounding conditions are outlined in the staff report. Section 26.10 of the Springfield Township zoning resolution outlines the requirements and procedures for approval of a preliminary development plan and zoning map amendment. As portrayed in the submitted application, the applicant is requesting a zoning map amendment from R4 Multiple Family Residence District to RPUD Residential Planned Unit Development to construct 30 1,500 square foot townhomes on the site. The subject property has been vacant for many years, previously having been a nursing facility. I actually have some photographs here. The submitted site plan shows a 6 structures. Let me pull this up here again. With a central green space, these structures contain anywhere between 4 to 6 townhome units with a ground floor 2-car garage for each unit. The site plan shows a one-way access drive around the rear and side perimeter of the site. The site plan indicates that the structures will have ground floor garages with 2 living floors above. A 40-foot setback is shown from the front of the lot facing Daly Road and 30 feet setbacks on the rear and sides of the site. The central green space shown in the center qualifies as open common area space as defined in section 26.06. The proposed green space comprises approximately 15% of the total site area. The submitted site plan also shows 8 proposed off-site surface level parking spaces in addition to the 2 off-street garage spaces per unit. OKI measured the average annual daily trips at 11,120 just outside the site on Daly Road, and based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers standards, this development would add approximately 210 daily trips. As a part of the review process, the board should determine if the applicant's request is consistent with the township's adopted land use plan and development strategies for this property. As the board is aware, the Township Board of Trustees adopted the Comprehensive Neighborhood Master Plan update in 2016, which also serves as the township's land use plan. The township's land use plan depicts the subject properties as multifamily residence, which is defined as detached or attached housing and related compatible uses, typically 2- and 3-story buildings with scale, massing, density layout, and specifications compatible with site constraints and character of existing residential developments in the surrounding area, and where more than one occupant uses an entranceway for access to individual units. On May 4th of 2023, Sanders Development Group, the applicant, held an open house in the Township Administration Building and invited all property owners within 200 feet to view the proposed site plan, renderings, and speak with those involved in the project, to ask questions, make comments, and give suggestions about the proposed building and use. While the open house is not considered a formal part of the zoning process, the open house setting allows those most impacted by the development to voice any concerns they may have and connect with the applicant in case any future issues should arise. On May 4th at the open house, approximately 5 adjacent property owners attended. Of those in attendance, some property owners voiced concerns about existing drainage issues and how this development might exacerbate said issues, and potential automobile noise heard from the rear of the site. At the open house, the applicant stated that they hoped that the proposed multifamily development, through greater residential intensity, will create more advocates for the area, potentially driving McAvoy Park improvements in the city of Cincinnati across the street. As outlined in section 26.10 of the Springfield Township zoning resolution, the application was first considered by the Township Zoning Commission at a hearing on May 15th, 2023. At the hearing, the Zoning Commission heard the report as given by staff, the applicant's presentation, and questions and concerns from adjacent property owners. Again, concerns from adjacent property owners were mostly related to potential water issues and noise from the proposed development. After hearing all of the information presented by staff, the applicant, and adjacent property owners, the Zoning Commission voted 3-0 to recommend approval of the application to amend the zoning map and approve of the preliminary development plans to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees. So the Zoning Commission, again, makes a recommendation to the board with the following 5 conditions. First, that the applicant shall adhere to all requirements of Hamilton County Public Works for water retention and runoff. Second, that lighting, landscaping, and signage plans shall be submitted as part of the final development plan application. Third, that the applicant complies with all requirements of the Hamilton County Engineers Office regarding traffic impact. Fourth, that all other zoning requirements, unless otherwise noted on the submitted site plan and/or approved by the Zoning Commission or Board of Trustees, shall be in accordance with the Springfield Township zoning resolution. And finally, fifth, that the applicant shall meet with all other regional regulatory agencies within Hamilton County for a pre-development meeting to ensure compliance related to permitting before the submittal of a final development plan for the Zoning Commission's review. And Trustee Dukes Davis, that concludes my staff report.
Thank you. Do we have any questions to staff regarding the report, Mr. Honeywell?
Well, the one question that came up, and I know I had received a call about this, was water. Is water something that we're permitted to take into account in this zoning hearing? I guess that would be a good way to
Sure.
frame the question.
Mr. Honeywell, it's not. Water detention, retention, water impacts are regulated by the county, Hamilton County Public Works and Stormwater District. So it's not something that's even regulated by Springfield Township, and definitely not something that's considered as a part of the zoning map amendment hearing or application or the preliminary development plan process.
And so that would come through the developer's dealings with Public Works
That's correct.
and complying with the stormwater regulations. Do we know, well, we can address this to the
applicant.
developer, the applicant, okay. And under R4, if we were to not approve this under R4, what could we be looking at?
Yeah, so,
Similar.
being zoned, R4 currently, the code would allow approximately, you'd have to subdivide the lot as there's about 200 feet of frontage on Daly Road, but you could construct approximately 2 4-unit buildings, with a rear setback requirement of about 40 feet. So this is about 10 feet, closer to the eastern property line being proposed. The nice thing about, I suppose, the nice thing for any adjacent property owners that have concerns is that through this process, again, the next step after this hearing, if the board were to consider approving this application, is that the applicant will actually have to come back to the zoning commission with a final development plan, which would include things like landscaping plans, lighting plans, essentially your full construction set, where the commission can place conditions for approval based on some of those things. With straight letter zoning as it is today, we would have no say in how close the parking lot is to the property line, for example, landscaping, material used, that kind of stuff. So there are pros and cons, certainly, to either route, sticking with the R4 zoning versus having someone interested in developing, go through this rezoning process, if that answers your question, Mr. Hunterlaw.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
Now the applicant has an opportunity to present his or her case to the board. If you'd like to stand up, approach the podium if there's anyone here on behalf of the property owner.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Sanders, principal owner of Sanders Development Group. I'm here to answer questions mostly, but definitely wanted to thank the committee for the recommendation and thank the residents actually too. As a developer, sometimes you show up in neighborhoods and no one shows up, and we're actually appreciative of the feedback. We held the open house so that we could gather as much intel as possible so that we could do something and develop in response to some of those different concerns. And so we're really appreciative of the opportunity, and we'd like to develop where residents actually care. So we're excited about the opportunity to develop on this site, remove a blighted property from the building, and put eyes on that park that's across the street. And so any other questions, we're here to answer them, and I'll just leave it at that. And thank you.
Go ahead.
This says they're townhomes. Are they rental or sale townhomes?
These would be rental.
Rental, okay.
And is there, do you know, Robert, do you know, is there water, I don't see any water detention in this. Is there underground detention?
Yeah, we're at the conceptual stage, so, upon getting approval, that gives the developer the ability now to throw dollars at advancing civil drawings and all of those different things, along with our architects and Elevar, to educate us on, what's actually on the site and, what sort of easements and things like that are in place. So we plan on learning that as we go through the architectural process. These are just conceptual plans. This could, it could reduce by a unit depending on what we learn, but right now it's conceptual.
So if this is conceptual, we're not approving that layout per se?
The preliminary development plan only requires essentially this level of detail. So to Mr. Sanders' comment, this kind of gives him the green light to go ahead, if the board were to consider approving the application at this stage, to do a little bit more due diligence as far as hiring civil engineers to come up with detention plans or retention plans, whatever that may be, which is required for submittal in the final development plan application.
Gotcha.
So this is still, preliminary, kind of conceptual to Mr. Sanders' point. But if and when he were to come back for final development plan approval, the submission can't be drastically different than what he's showing today. So, you know, it may change by a unit or two, or some of the roadway configurations may change slightly, but this is sort of the level of detail that this stage in the process would require.
Okay. The only thing I noticed, I mean, it does look fairly dense, and it looks like there's maybe 8, there's garages underneath each of these, correct?
Correct.
And then there's 8, maybe you could say visitors spaces.
Yeah,
Yeah,
There's a lot more than that.
no, there's 8 guests. According to the drawing, there's 8.
right.
What?
According to the drawing, there's 8
Yeah,
guest spots or visitors spots.
right.
Plus you got the driveway that people could park in as opposed to the garage.
Right, okay, you could put a car there. Okay.
What rental, dollar per square foot or dollar per unit are you looking at?
Right now, our initial projections are anywhere from 17 to 1,900.
2 bedrooms,
3 bedrooms,
3 bedroom?
yeah, or 2 bedrooms and a den, depending on the family makeup.
And Robert, you said these are 1,500
Yeah.
square feet?
Square feet, yeah.
Is that 15, 16? 1,600, 1,600. And we're still goofing around with,
Right.
you know,
And here
the,
it's like 1,500, but
Yeah.
it's not a big difference, 15, 16.
correct.
Gotcha.
So one of the other issues that the residents raised was the potential noise that would come from this development. Have you planned out any plan to address potential and increase in noise around the property?
Well, one, you know, obviously the property's blighted right now, so it's, you know, it's incredibly quiet. We do expect with some residential folks being there, that there will be some, you know, naturally occurring noise that residents typically make. But our hope is that, you know, this development, you know, outweighs any, you know, anything of that nature that's disruptive to the adjacent property owners. Also, too, we just heard that preliminary in our last meeting, and so our plan is to have further conversations around what that looks like. For example, some of the feedback we got was the properties to the rear, maybe they're a little bit too close. So one of the things that we would do is, with my architect, is try to see if we can move that a little bit further west, if that makes any sense. But any and all concerns, from our standpoint, we plan on having conversations with all the adjacent property owners. And actually last week, we toured the swim club just to begin assessing you know, the existing conditions of it, seeing how we could complement, you know, what's currently exists at the swim club. So that's kind of our approach to anything that we do. That's a great question.
Ms. Dukes Davis, one other thing to, I guess, consider to answer your question is that, you know, this site was originally used for a nursing home. It's been vacant for a number of years, but that would have brought, at that time, some traffic and noise just with staff and residents and visitors and things like that. To the north, there is the North Hills Swim Club, which is very active today. Again, kind of bringing some traffic and visitors and residents. And then there is a multifamily apartment complex just to the south. So, you know, when considering a zoning map amendment, surrounding conditions are important and should be taken into consideration. Those are some of the conditions that are surrounding the site.
There's a drive-through and another commercial building just west of the multifamily.
Correct.
Correct.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Is there anyone here in opposition? restate her name? Dan, can you restate her name? Could you just state your name and your address, please? Thank you.
Robin Hendley, 6341 Ridgefield. I am not in opposition to the development in general. I want to go on the record for that. I, more than anyone, would like to see something there other than that vacant nursing home, because I'm directly behind it, with the exception of maybe 10 or 15 feet on the west side or the north or south side property line. My concerns from the beginning are first and foremost water. George and Jan Smith live immediately to my, looking out my kitchen door to my left, which would be to the south, and then his neighbor Warren is on the other end. We are at the crux of where the water is impacted. When I bought my house in 1999, the previous owners had put in I-beam supports on the entire one wall of the basement. It was a hydrostatic pressure problem caused by excessive water runoff. I was comfortable buying the house because they had all of the engineering plans when Paul came in and did the completion. I had them reviewed by an architect who basically told me, and I shared this with Kathleen, it was the most over-engineered repair on a residential property he had ever seen. And he said, if there's ever a tornado or a storm or a nuclear blast, stand against the I-beam. Your house may disappear, but you'll be fine. And that's exactly what he said to me. So I was confident in doing that, but he did caution that as time went by, natural ground shift would cause some of the water to displace itself, for lack of a better phrase. So I ended up putting French drains in the basement at a cost of around $4,000, and I took my spouting and extended it out. If you look at my backyard, you can clearly see, you know what a break is. You play golf, mine breaks 5 different ways. So depending on how hard the rain comes down, that depends on where I have to chase water from. I've almost got it down to where I have no basement water problems. But these last few storms we've had, George and I have stood at our back doors and watched the fence line. The water comes right up to the fence line now. If that drain back there or that drainage ditch is not scrupulously clean, it comes in our yards. You know how water works. Once the absorption's there, it backs up through your pipes in your basement. So yes, we do have concerns on that. I'll caution how I'll say this. While I have confidence in the township to look out for my best interest, I do not share that same concern with any office in Hamilton County. They don't care about the townships. They care about them. And that's based on the loss of institutional knowledge at that governmental level across the board and watching it happen when I was employed by them for 16 years. So that's why I want to make sure that our concerns are on record. Water's first and foremost. Secondly, the density of the units. If you look at an aerial map, roughly, and you look at the back of the nursing home, which is basically an inverse L, the apartment building, the carryout, and so on to the Happy's Pizza. Generally, the actual building placement is in more or less a straight line. This brings it much closer to our fences, particularly when the intent down the road is to maybe bring these apartments all the way down to the corner. I'm a little nervous about having that cut, having traffic that can go all the way around the building. You can't put any kind of a reasonable buffer there. That's already been looked at twice in the last 2 attempts by other individuals to get the property not rezoned, but conditional use permits and variances and things of that nature. An arborist has said twice now, a natural buffer is not acceptable because there is a swale that goes to the aquifer. And you have a fairly significant slope from the edge of the parking lot down to where it comes in, it gullies out, and then it runs right up to my property line, all of our property lines. The last survey that was done that I completed when I bought the house, the property line to the rear is roughly about 6 to 8 inches from where my fence sits. So when I repaired and replaced my fence, I put my fence on my side. So it got me further away from the line, so I was not encroaching on that property ownership. If you have that many units on a footprint that small, you're definitely going to have water problems. Now, Mr. Sanders stating, his internal courtyard, so to speak, would take care of that. That's not true. Water doesn't work like that. It's not like a wetland swap where you're going to do a development and you have a wetland protection area here, and you say, well, we want to build there, so what we'll do, let's give you 5 acres over here to replace this. That works under that legal condition. But when you're talking about water runoff, it doesn't work that way. And that amount of courtyard space isn't going to compensate for changes to the pavement configuration, concrete basis, the footers, people parking in these internal garage areas. It just isn't going to flow that way. And with, climate changing, causing rain to be more severe for shorter periods of time, I can just see what's going to happen. And the fact they're closer to the property lines with traffic. You've got that many people, you've got toilets flushing, you've got washers running, you've got dishwashers running. You've got a lot more drain activity. Now, when that nursing home was built, it was built in 1965. Ridgefield Drive was constructed between 1949 and 1952. When the nursing home came in, that's the original building. There's never been rear entrances. That back door was never allowed to be used for employees. From the day I moved in, they had to park their cars, walk around to the front of the building, and go into the same entrance that visitors did. It was always in the front. There was no traffic in the back. The only noise issue we had was when they tipped the garbage dumpsters at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that was long before the township entered into the multi-county situation with Rumpke, where they've got a limitation. I believe they're not supposed to start till 6 o'clock. So we've got a timing factor here. The houses were there first. Now, if anything goes in from a residential point of view, that's fine. But it should not encroach upon that timeline, nor encroach upon setbacks and potential water issues that we may be facing. So that's where my primary concerns are, and they continue to be so. If you put a change in zoning in place, and there's an argument down the road, you have 2 attorneys, maybe more in the room, I don't know if you are, but someone can hold you to what that designation states. And I just think consideration needs to be given. I just want to make sure that I go on record. That's the way I feel about it. And I think the neighbors, if I can speak for them, probably have the same concerns.
I think it's important to note, if I may, just jump in here real quick, just given my experience in dealing with a lot of these type of development cases. In my experience dealing with the county public works, and I'm not going to argue with your point relative to the county agencies at this point, Robin. However, I will tell you that they generally err on the side of over-engineering retention or detention of stormwater than the inverse. I don't have to point any further than our own property back here and at our public works facility, where they required us to create detention that's probably 3 times as big as it needs to be. So they generally err on the side of more as opposed to less. And in this case, I think anytime there's a new development, if this was simply rehabbing the existing building, I would be more inclined to agree with you regarding the potential water issues. But when you now are scraping an existing building and you're redeveloping the site, so to speak, and moving dirt around, you have now the ability that you don't have today, which is to make the water situation even better than it is today. And they will be required to do that. The requirements that the county has in place when they look at developments like this is to ensure that if the impervious surface area increases, which it will with this, that they cannot shed any more water from the site than what it is today. And in most cases, it's much less than it is today. So, and additionally, their civil engineering drawings would have to comply with the preliminary plan that would have to be reviewed at a final development plan process here. So there is a check and balance to your county sort of concern that regardless of what they require them to do, we will have it looked at the final development plan process to ensure that the stormwater calculations are correct.
All right. One other question that came up too, we want to clarify, is this truly going to be market rate housing? In other words, the tenants that will be renting these units, are they writing the check to the landlord for the full market rent? Or are we looking at something that's the new wave project-based vouchers? In other words, it's a new label for Section 8. Instead of a consumer qualifying and taking that voucher to a permissible and a willing landlord, the voucher is attached to the unit. Is that what we're looking at here? Are we looking at the actual tenant paying the full market rent? That was
Ms.
another
Henley, I just
concern
wanna
that
make
came
sure
up.
that it's clear that that isn't a part
No, I
of the
understand.
zoning consideration
Understood.
at all. And it's really not something that a road I think that we should go down as far as this hearing. I mean, if it's something that you want to discuss with the applicant after the hearing, you can, but I'm not comfortable kind of going down that road at this public hearing. Because it's just not at all a part of the application.
And frankly, it's not constitutional to consider that for zoning.
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
The one thing, Robin, the one thing I would say is if you look at the existing site plan there, there's not a lot of green space that, you know, as it exists now, and if that was built in 65, that was built way before all the Hamilton County stormwater regulations on construction on construction and post-construction runoff. And I can tell you from some developments I've been involved in, they're pretty strict on water detention. And it's not just something where you can, you know, it's not like you're saying, well, we're gonna take some green space here to offset what we're losing someplace else. They make you, you know, you gotta put the whole drainage system in so that the impervious surfaces don't just run off to the neighbors, but they drain into the water detention, plan with underground drains. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I guess if I can just add one thing before we, hear any more questions or comments from anyone else that would like to address the board tonight. Would it be helpful if I read through the required conditions for approval of preliminary development plans, just so we make sure that we understand, exactly what is required? In fairness to the applicant, things like water detention or retention or how that's going to be engineered or anything really outside of these conditions, required conditions for approval are outside of the scope of what he was required to consider for this hearing. Would it be helpful if I ran through those conditions for approval quickly?
You can. I think you're saying maybe we're getting the horse
Kind
ahead
of putting the cart before the
Yeah, the
horse.
cart ahead of, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so just quickly, I just want to remind the board and everyone else who is curious what the conditions for approval of preliminary development plans are. So first, that the application is consistent with the adopted Springfield Township Land Use Plan, which in this case it is. That the uses proposed will not be detrimental to present and potential surrounding uses, but will have a beneficial effect which could not be achieved as well under other zoning districts. Third, that the internal streets and primary and secondary roads that are proposed properly interconnect with the surrounding existing road network. 4, that the site will be accessible from public roads that are generally adequate to carry the traffic. 5, that the minimum common open space areas basically have been met in the application. And then finally, that the preliminary development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of this resolution to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of the residents of Springfield Township. So those are the considerations of the application, really at this point in that process.
Gotcha. And, the one thing, and I know this has been a concern to some of the neighbors in that part, but we do have this dilapidated nursing home that has sat there for a long time, and it really is turning into a blighted, area in our
I don't know that
township.
there's much potential for reuse of the existing structure.
Right, it's a demolition one way or the,
Right.
right, okay.
So I didn't mean, if there's anyone else that has comments, questions, concerns, they're certainly welcome, but I just
And
thought
again, there's been no objection to residential development. We'd love to see something back in.
Yeah.
Because that place is a hot mess. And I'm concerned somebody's gonna get in there and have a fire. And it's close enough. If the winds are blowing right, it could hit us, it could hit that apartment building. It could do a lot of very, very bad things. It's just the water and the density, proximity with those lines.
are these photographs, like, I don't know which page this is, 22 or 25, are these representative of what would be built? Are they just conceptual, or is it? I think maybe we,
Yeah, Mr.
they're
Honnold,
conceptual.
at this point,
And
these
that
are
would come like that. That would come,
at the final development plan process.
Okay.
Yeah, right,
which again it has to meet that as well.
right.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Yes.
Ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Meg Hammond, and I have been a member of that swim club for longer than I care to say. And it has been a part of the community. A few years ago, it was in financial trouble, and some of us said, we need to do this for our community. And so we bought it. I am the proud owner, along with some other people, of a swim club that I haven't gone to in a couple of years. My question, my comment is really about the quality of life. I look at it and I know I can remember when the old people used to sit on the porch in the nursing home and we'd wave when we were going into the swim club, and it was all lovely. And it's gone now, so we have to move on. But in looking at the drawings, I think there are too many units on that space. And when I see the projection, and it looks like you're building right onto practically the sidewalk onto the street. We have that in College Hill. They built it right on the sidewalk. There's hardly any green space. It's 2-3 bedrooms. You're going to have kids. Where are they going to play? In that little green strip? There's not enough green space in this development. You certainly don't want the kids crossing Daly Road. It's not safe, even at the light. People are going through all the time. Another thing about quality of life is the fact that the swim club does have swim meets. There was one the other night, last Thursday night, and they were 2 small swim clubs. Ours is not a big swim club, and again, it was against a smaller swim club. There were absolutely because across the street at McAvoy, football and cheerleading has been going on for years there in the summer and into the fall. That's part of our community. There were no parking spaces whatsoever in the swim club. They were on the grass. They were all in courts, basketball courts, everywhere they could because of both activities going on. Then when you put in there a residential with only 8 parking spaces for guests, you've really going to have a problem on those event nights when you have both McAvoy and the swim club busy. And they're going to want more, if the residents are going to be trying to park on the street, there is just no parking at all. It's really getting to be a dangerous situation. So it's not, again, I'm not objecting to having some units put there. We need them. Springfield Township needs them. The swim club is not against it at all. We'd like to work together. But in looking at it, I think there's simply too many units. And I'm thinking about the kids and where are they going to play. And we would love to have the swim club working with this apartment development or townhouse development to do some good things together. And we're talking about the owners and are talking about some things that we could possibly work out with the developers. But I think we maybe need to scale that back a little bit and give a little more breathing room. It all seems to be so crushed into the one space. It's not that big a space. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Board, if I may, looking at the site plan, just keep in mind that there is a driveway to allow parking. The 8 guest spots are simply just overflow, but there are additional spaces, obviously, in the driveways. And then beyond that, it is private property. So people utilizing the park that's actually in the city of Cincinnati would be able to use parking on this site anyway. It's private. It's not public park. So they wouldn't be allowed to park and probably be subject to being towed again.
Same thing if they parked at North Hills.
But again, this is a conceptual plan, and Mr. Sanders, you're here, you're listening to the residents and their concerns about the density and the number of units, and I'm sure you're going to take all that into consideration when you submit final plans to us, if we get to that point.
Absolutely. And also too, it's also why I actually bring my architect as well, because I want them to hear exactly what comes from the residents too. Typically, you just show up and take notes and you go back. For me, I want my architect hearing all these responses so that we can address them collectively. And we're just taking notes, and yes, we are having conversations with the swim club, and we hope that the kids play at the swim club, in the green space, and the park across the street.
Very good. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? Please state your name and your address, sir.
6321 Ridgefield Drive. My concern is that little green space behind those units, the back of the parking area. There isn't much space as far as from that nursing home to my backyard as it is now. Is that going to get even smaller when they develop this apartment complex?
Again, this is just.
This is just conceptual, yeah. That's, right now, that's just my concern, though. Just the fact that there's only, what, maybe 10 feet, if that much, between that property line of the nursing home and my backyard.
And so I have a question, Mr. Sanders, for you. You're in communication with the swim club. How are you communicating with residents outside of these meetings here?
Yeah, it's a timing thing.
Okay.
I've got several projects going on, and, it's just a matter of getting around to the other residents. So that's part of our community engagement. And additionally, that's also the reason why we held an open house, so that we could have an organized effort in one place for them to show up and provide us with that feedback. Us going out additionally, is just part of what we do, generally speaking, on other projects as well.
So are you considering holding another open house or going door to door and speaking with individual residents?
Yeah, I don't know if an open house makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of the adjacent property owners. Our plan is to go talk to the owners themselves personally, because we want to point out exactly some of these issues that we're talking about, if it's possible.
And Mr. Smith, during the staff consideration, they said it would be 30 feet in the rear. So if you're 10 feet now, it would be 30 feet from the building to the property line.
And I like what he said, when he said something about, if necessary, moving units, forward or taking something out, and I like that idea.
So it sounds like it's important to the residents that they have that open dialogue with you all in this whole planning process.
I just want clarification. Are you 30 feet from the building, the driveway, or the garage, or the parking, or driveway that goes around? Is it 30 feet from the building?
Back of the building.
From the back of the building, so you have the driveway and the going into the garage, and then you have the street. So really, the green space is going to be about, 12 feet.
And
So from
again, if
end of
the.
If that's
well,
how it's shown here, I just wondered.
Sure, and if if the board were to consider approving this application, as a part of that final development plan process, the applicant would submit a landscaping plan, which is relatively thorough, so we would
Yeah, I
have
just
more
wondered
information then about,
Yeah, it's 30,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's 30 feet from the end of the building, and then you got the other improvements.
Right.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
yep.
And to be clear, it is well within this board's purview to put conditions on preliminary approval that would then have to be met during the final development process.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
My name is Robert Petty. I'm 6320 Richfield, right across from them. First of all, ma'am, I'd like to ask you with the swim club, Yours is
Sir,
private?
I apologize. Could you restate your name and address? And
Certainly.
we have
Robert
somebody
Panetti?
with minutes, and they have to listen to it.
No problem.
Days from now, and they're gonna call us, like, who was that? What did he say?
Robert
So you-
Panetti, 6320 Ridgefield Drive.
Perfect.
Ma'am, your property is private property, correct, at the swim club? And you said your entire place was covered with cars from the event in McAvoy Park, correct?
There was a swim meet at
Yeah.
the swim club, and there was a lot of activity, scheduled
Mhm.
activity at McAvoy.
How many people were parked on your property?
Can we make sure that the comments are addressed to the board?
I might want to know how many people were parked at her property that were not part of the swim club. And if we could figure that out, how are you going to take advantage of the people that are going to be living at this place to say that they're not going to drive in through across McAvoy Park and park into their property if they're already parking in the swim club's property?
Yeah, parking is
Yeah, so
definitely a question.
that is a major problem right there. So with
I can tell you,
regards to...
my kids swam there. People didn't, the swim meets bring enough cars that there really isn't anybody parking from.
I've been there for 23 years, and I see it myself.
They might
True.
park on the street in front of it, but we never, ever had problems with people pulling into the swim club. They did always park on the grass, all around the tennis courts, all around everywhere. But I don't think there was ever a problem with McAvoy people parking at the swim club. I mean, I was there for 20 years.
Maybe they are at night now when they,
That's what I'm just wondering.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
We've never had that problem.
It's
Yeah,
not
so
our
I'm wondering
property.
if that's private property with the new spot, who's to say that they're not going to drive into there and park?
Then they can tow them.
That's why I'm wondering if that's the case. If it would be the case at the swim club, then why aren't they being towed there? If they are coming from McAvoy Park and parking over there.
It's
They
private
could, yeah,
it's private property. It's totally up to the private.
Yeah, that's why I'm
property
just
owner.
wondering
They
about
wanna
that.
You can create a private tow zone.
No, true, of course you can. Now the other problem is with as many properties that are going to be on there, they're going to have to do something to that street, would you not, to widen that, to accommodate the 80 or 90 some cars that are now going to be coming in and out of that property every day?
Not necessarily. That would be something that the applicant would have to discuss with, I guess that would be the Hamilton County engineers.
That's why I was thinking it would also. So that's, would
Right,
that
and
not?
that is one of the conditions of approval that was suggested by the zoning commission.
Yeah, so if they have to widen
The applicant would have
that,
to do all that before this application, or after this application is
Yeah.
considered, yeah.
so, but if they have to widen that road, now your frontage is even less.
I don't know that, we don't know that they're gonna have to widen the road
When will we know that information?
after this hearing, if the board were to consider approving this application.
Okay.
Here's what happens. Once this board, if they do, approves this preliminary development plan, they will then
Yeah.
have to go into final development review process, which means they're gonna have to meet with all the relevant county agencies, the engineer being
Yeah.
one. The engineer will require them to do a traffic impact analysis, which will determine if widening or any additional road work in the public right-of-way is warranted. At that point, if there is, they would be required to do that prior to even getting a building permit to move dirt. So
Okay.
they wouldn't necessarily be required to complete the road work prior, but it would be contingent, their permits would be contingent upon them doing the road work, meaning they wouldn't be able to move in any one of those units until that road work is done, if there's road work that's required. That's
Okay.
the if. I can tell you,
Yeah.
given the amount of traffic generating, looking at that, probably not gonna require any additional road work, because frankly, the nursing home probably generated close to the same amount of trips per day that this would. And it's done on an actuarial basis based on their experience in these type of developments as compared to what the previous use was across the country. So I would be surprised if they're gonna make them widen an already 4-lane road, for this type of development. I just don't see it happen, but that's just my experience.
I'd like to find out about that when it comes up.
And we will, and find out about it, for sure.
Anyone else? Seeing that there are none, we will close the public portion of the board, close the public portion for the board's deliberation. We need a motion.
So moved.
Well,
You don't need to close, you don't need to, motion's closing.
Oh, we don't? It's closed?
Yes.
Closing public portion
Yeah.
of the deliberation, you're not closing the meeting.
You don't need to do that by motion.
Yeah, into the microphone. It's still public.
Basically, basically what I see here is multifamily use of some property that I think is consistent with the land use plan in the township, that this would be multi-use. It does appear that the density is pretty, it's about as dense as you could make it, it looks to me, and I think as the applicant goes through their process, they need to take into account that density and to make sure that there's adequate buffering for adjoining properties. But given what we have a basically abandoned nursing home that I think has been in that condition about 10 years. And we could end up with far worse than what's being proposed here. So I would be in favor of approving this with the consideration that the developer and his architect look at this to look at ways to minimize the impact through buffering, through possibly changing the density as it moves forward. But I see this as a first step in a process. It would come back.
Can I make a suggestion for a condition that I think would appease and solve a few issues at once?
Sure.
Looking at the site plan, if you were to eliminate, and turn these into, instead of 5 townhomes, make these 4 townhomes each, would, 1, reduce density, and 2, allow you to move this unit at 6 further to the west, which would then give a greater buffer to the properties to the east.
That was the exact thing that I was looking at. I wasn't going to maybe give them that, but we can.
My point is, whatever you decide here today preliminarily, as long as they come back with a final development plan that meets the spirit of what you approved preliminarily, that's what they're allowed to do. So if you want to reduce density or increase the green space to the east, you have to do it now.
Right now, it's about 2,500 square foot of land per unit. Even for condos, that's a pretty small amount of land per unit. You know what I mean? 2,500, a little over 2,500 square foot per unit for that site.
Based
Normally,
on the
condos
whole-
are closer to 4,000.
Based on the whole.
Right, the 1.809 acres.
Well, with that being said, then, it would be my thought that we would make that we would approve this, but with the additional restriction that the number of units being decreased by 2 to allow for more buffering to the property owners to the east and help reduce the intensity of the overall site.
Are you saying 2 units or 2 buildings or?
2 units
2
per.
units out of 32?
Per building, 2 units per.
No, but
Two
2
units
units
off.
off of that one building, which would allow you to move the whole thing, the
To the
back
west.
building to the west.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not every
So instead of
building.
having 5 and 5, you'd have 4 and 4, and then the building would move
Right.
Correct.
back.
4 and 4.
How wide is each unit? 24 feet. Okay, so then it would allow you to, in theory, widen the buffer to the east by approximately 20 feet.
No, if you did 2 per side, that would be
No,
48
it's
feet.
2 total, 1
No,
per
it's
side.
1
2
per side.
total.
No, 2 total.
Taking
One for
these,
each side.
They go from 5 to 4 on the
All right.
back.
Making it 4 and
These
4.
are 24 feet wide, these boxes, okay?
Right.
Take this box out and this box out, right? then it gives you additional room to shift everything this way. So you increase now this space by what these were, which are 24 feet. So I would say a good condition would be, and since these aren't numbered, it's hard to say, but if you were to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, townhome 4 and 5 would be 4 units each.
Right.
This, if the rest would remain the same, then you would be able to increase the buffer zone by 20 feet on the eastern property line. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I ask a question to clarify something on the outlay?
Wait. The board has closed deliberation. You should take no more questions. Sorry, but they've closed deliberation.
That would definitely help the
So
density.
it would, taking out only 2 units would
It
help
would take
density.
quite a bit on the buffer on the east side. And it would also, as long as they don't just add parking spaces there, they gotta move the whole building.
Right. So theoretically, based on, I think, the condition that you're considering, it would increase that rear yard setback from 30 feet to about 50 feet.
Really 54, because you're gonna gain the whole
Right.
24 feet.
Right. I mean, I'm saying approximately.
And it's going to be about 36 feet of
That
grass,
one?
sort of.
Yeah. This is sort of what we're saying in different buildings. I mean, this site plan shows 4,
You would just inverse it.
right?
You could.
Although it doesn't, I don't know that it really makes a difference.
Well,
but-
now,
That wouldn't do anything.
this plan has 5 of each, Joe. What we're looking at here has 5 on each.
This does.
Well, which drawing controls?
Can't you achieve the same thing?
Yeah, it has the easement.
The other one didn't have the 40-foot easement, this one does. From the road.
Right.
Oh, there's a 40-foot setback on the road. Okay.
Which made us reconfigure the units.
When you say easement, you don't mean right of way.
Yeah,
Road setback.
setback,
You mean a zoning setback? Where's
the county setbacks, you got to be so many feet from the road, don't you?
So if that 40 feet, if that were something that we could make smaller, we can shift the whole thing and create a larger buffer on the east.
Sure, I guess I'm trying to figure out, is it, I don't want to confuse terms, because easement and right of way are 2 very different things in my mind.
Yes, they're very different.
And so are zoning setbacks. So that could be completely different too. So Kathleen, do you know, is this a deeded easement for right of way?
It's a right of way.
It's a right of way.
These plans show that red line as right-of-way. But
Well, who owns the right-of-way? County? Is it a county right-of-way?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a county road, I'm sure it is.
Well, they're not going to let you build anything in the right of way.
So just so I'm clear, the picture I'm looking at on my computer is 32 units. That is 30, correct? There's 9 on each side and 6 on each end is 30.
Correct.
Which one's correct?
He's saying this one.
That one.
So you're asking for 30, not 32.
The only thing that they would probably let you do is what you have here, which is your driveways. And they would probably put those in, give right of reversal.
Those are sidewalks.
Those are sidewalks out to the street. I was
These
looking-
are?
yeah,
Okay, well, then they would for sure allow that.
They would allow that, yeah.
Then the only way to,
pick it up, you gotta lose 2.
then you're reducing, you're still reducing it by 2, but because this is the correct one, you're now 4 less than what that conceptual drawing showed.
Right, 28 units.
Well, we were also looking at narrowing the units
Okay,
and extending the building, and narrowing them a little bit.
okay, well, I think then the condition probably, to make it easy, is just to say, hey, you want to increase
right.
the
The setback,
green space
yeah.
buffer, from meaning from the driveway here to the property line by an additional 20 feet to what's shown on this drawing. And then however they accomplish that, they accomplish.
Yeah.
Whether they narrow the units or they lose units, that's entirely up to them.
Well, you narrow the units and then you start losing square footage too.
Not if you make them deeper.
But that's, I'm not sure.
Joe, if you narrow them 2 feet and go deeper 2 feet or 4 feet, you won't lose square footage. It'll just be more shotgun than, instead of 24 feet, they'd be 22 feet. And then you make up the square footage by making it longer. Does that make sense?
I would approach it purely as a setback requirement to the eastern property line, and then require a landscape plan to be approved administratively. That's the way I would approach it. That's the way I recommend it. Because given this plan, given the right-of-way, they're already losing the 2 units that you were proposing to eliminate off the conceptual plan. So the additional right-of-way coupled with the increase in green space in the east, you're accomplishing the same thing.
Well, and I hear the concerns of the residents, and I think those are valid. And we want to come up with a plan here that is going to meet our conceptual requirements for this land use in the township, and at the same time, not have an adverse impact on adjoining property owners. So I think that's probably a reasonable thing. And at the same time, not tie the design characteristics, not tie the hands of the developer to the design characteristics. So maybe we say that the condition of approval would be that we increase the buffer area in the back from what's now probably 10
30 feet now.
Well, it's 30 feet
Including the
from
driveway
building.
so it'd go to 50 feet.
50 feet. I think that's,
I think
Or
that's,
30 feet from the driveway would be about the same.
and that is
that's from the
driveway.
building to the property line.
Or longer.
Correct.
Okay. Any comments? That
No, I think 50 feet's fair.
So in addition, just so that we're clear, in addition to the 5 recommended conditions from the zoning commission, it sounds like we're also considering a 6th condition for approval, which is increasing that rear yard setback from approximately 30 feet to 50 feet. Okay.
And so that I'm clear, making that buffer zone larger, will that address the density issue that has come up this evening?
Well, it'll eliminate 2 units. That'll make the density a little
Well,
smaller.
it might, or they might reconfigure the units
right.
to try and keep the same number.
But keep in mind that part of the issue with the density was taking up more land, therefore less buffer. By creating more buffer, you're in essence mitigating the negative effect of the density.
The only other thing I would say on this additional condition is that it would be subject to a landscape plan to be approved by staff
That's already in
with
it.
the final development plan.
It's already in
That's
it.
in there.
Well, it would be a required portion of the application for the final development plan.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're clear.
yep.
I just have a question. If you're worried about the green space, I would address the green space instead of setback from the building, because you can make that driveway bigger, you put parking back there. I mean, if you want green space, let's say we want so many feet of green space. Right now with this plan, am I correct, it's about 10 to 12 feet of green space?
In the rear,
Yeah,
probably about 10 feet.
so if you want 30 feet, instead of saying 50 from the drop back, just say 30 feet of green space
Fair enough.
in the west side of the property. And that
That's
way,
fine.
whatever they build there, they need to leave that green space. Does that make sense?
That's a good point, too. Fair enough. Yeah, I wasn't planning on moving it, making it 50 feet and then putting in more parking lots, so, yeah.
Right, but they could. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
what we said.
It could be too that if we have enough green space, it becomes a park
Right,
But also
yeah.
mitigate the concerns of traffic back there.
Exactly.
If it's a nice green space.
Yeah, for sure, yeah, there are different ways to engineer it, for sure.
Yeah, you can do it that, I mean, that'd be fine.
As an architect, as a designer, I like to have the 30-foot, you know, then the rest we can play with.
Right, you play with it, but you know you need to leave that green space there. That's what I was suggesting to the board.
So just so I'm clear, with that sixth condition, it's increasing the rear yard setback from 30 feet to 50 feet, with 30
No.
feet of that 50 being green space?
You're just saying, no, they want 30 feet.
We're just
of
saying
green
30
space.
feet of green space in the back.
On the
and
back.
How they come up with it is up to them. They could delete a unit, they could reconfigure, but yeah,
They're just creating a buffer.
Got it.
okay.
50 feet of green space in the rear yard. to
With
serve as a
those,
buffer.
with that additional condition, then I would make a motion to approve the preliminary development plan.
So moved.
All those in favor?
It's a roll call.
A roll call. Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So the motion was just to approve the preliminary development, is, we need also to approve the zone change? Or the amendment?
Zoning map amendment and the preliminary development plans.
Did we just do that for the
You
preliminary?
just mentioned the zone change, so just,
Those preliminary development.
yeah,
I
I'm sorry, the
said
preliminary development
preliminary
did not
development
mention the zone
plan.
map amendment, so just do a second motion to approve the zoning map amendment as recommended.
I'll make a second amendment then to approve the zoning map as we just amended.
So moved.
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
The change is approved.
Works.
We got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so that concludes our hearing.
First hearing.
The first hearing.
First hearing.
We have a second application,
Yes,
yep.
yes, yes. I was going to say that concludes our first hearing reference, what's my number here?
ZC 2023.
Second, so I ask everyone to please remain quiet, please. We are continuing on with our second hearing on a public hearing. So I will turn the hearing over to Ms. Kathleen Kennedy, reference of text amendment ZC 2023-001.
Thank you, Trustee Dukes Davis. So we're moving on to the next application. Please don't feel like you have to stick around if you don't want to, but this case is related to text amendments in the Springfield Township zoning resolution. So the Springfield Township zoning resolution was adopted in 2004, and since that time, the resolution has been amended to respond to various trends in land use, planning, and zoning in Hamilton County, Springfield Township, and throughout the region. The proposed amendments to the zoning resolution reflect some of these trends to improve the set of guidelines for development in the township, with a few other general housekeeping amendments. As the board, I'm sure, recalls, the Board of Trustees adopted Resolution Number 25, 2023, and then amended that resolution with Resolution Number 37, 2023, on April 25th of this year, which initiated the text amendment process as it relates to signage and sign illumination. As outlined in Ohio Revised Code 5519-.12 and Article 6 of the zoning resolution, the Springfield Township Zoning Commission reviewed and recommended approval of the proposed text amendments at a public hearing on May 15th of this year. So the zoning commission has reviewed these proposed text amendments, and they, again, make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. I'm not going to read these
No, you don't
amendments
have to.
aloud, but I think that, as the staff report indicates, these are amendments as related to signage and sign illumination. We're seeing trends in development, and you make amendments to the zoning resolution as those trends, carry on throughout time. It's also in response to a lot of redevelopment that we're seeing in the township, which is exciting, but we just want to kind of tighten up some of the regulations related to signs and their illumination. So if there are any questions about that, I am happy to answer those questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Does the board have any questions?
I don't have any questions. but I think that this is an improvement over our existing, over the existing code as it's the text of our zoning resolution, and I would make a motion to approve.
Second the motion?
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honolo?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Okay, thank you
And
very
it's
much.
approved.
Do we have a
Motion to
motion
adjourn.
to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor? Public hearing's adjourned.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees regular meeting. Today is June 13, 2023, and the time is approximately 5:45 p.m. Mr. Burning, may we please have a roll call?
Yes, Ms. Davis. Mr. Burning?
Present?
Mr. Honolo?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
Thank you. I'd like to ask everyone to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes from our regular session, May 9th, 2023, our regular work session, May 23rd, 2023, and a special meeting bid opening, May 23rd, 2023. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next is our fiscal officer, our financial report from our fiscal officer, Mr. Burning.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. For the month ending May 31st, 2023, the township expenditures were $2,960,784.33, and receipts were $2,425,598.09. That gives us an ending cash balance of $28,042,648.48. This includes obligations for expenditures, payroll, regular operating costs, ongoing capital improvement projects, and investments. What I do request from the board is the approval of the receipts, warrants, payroll expenditures, updated and current revenue and reports for the period ending May 31st, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and I just want everyone to know that the financial reports are available at the Township Building during regular business hours or on our website 24/7. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. Next, I'd like to turn this portion of our agenda over to Mr. Chris Gilbert for departmental action and discussion items.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. First on the agenda, we have a request to set the date and time for the annual tax budget. So we will be required to have a public hearing, as you're aware. My suggestion would be to have it at our next regular meeting in July at the beginning of the meeting at 5:30, if that works for you all. And I apologize, I don't know that date off the top of my head. July 11th, yes, thank you.
So have that at 5:30 and then our meeting after?
It would actually, the public hearing would be part of our meeting.
Okay.
So it's still going to be at 5:30.
Correct.
That of course works fine with me.
Right, okay, thank you.
Do we have a,
Motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have a request to set a dangerous property public hearing for 1139 Gracewind. Kathleen, I don't know if you want to explain this?
Yes, Mr. Gilbert, thank you. As the board is aware, we have, at the last regular meeting, the last regular work session, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution declaring the existing foundation, remaining foundation at 1139 Gracewind Court as a dangerous property condition. Per our revised dangerous property guidelines, a public hearing is set related to that property if requested by the property owner. So we did receive a request from the property owner to have a hearing related to the remaining foundation on that site. The property owner has requested some extensive time related to his work on the West Coast. He's not in town currently. So in conferring with Law Director Laura Abrams, we suggest that public hearing be set for the work session, the board's work session on June 27th at 8 a.m. Now today, so that date and time was given to the property owner. Today, I received correspondence from the property owner requesting additional time extended beyond June 27th at 8 a.m. Ms. Abrams, I don't know if you want to make any more comment about that.
Yeah, I would say, and Kathleen and I discussed this earlier, our concern is this is a dangerous property, and it is open to anyone to get into this. It's a foundation. There's debris in there. There's actually methodology to get in is created by some of the debris. So we are concerned that this be left open for an extended period of time, hence the reason it's a dangerous property. And the owner did come in today, which didn't give us an opportunity really to have any, or the letter did come in today to really discuss that with him. So I think the best course of action is to go ahead and set the hearing for our work session. And if the owner wants to fence that property or otherwise make it safe prior to that date, then go ahead and grant the extension. But to grant an extension for another 2 weeks, which makes it 6 weeks since they were notified that it was dangerous, certainly a longer period of time since it's been dangerous, I think is really problematic. And we've, as the board is well aware, we've had difficulty with compliance with this owner. We've been dealing with this property for over 2 years now. So it's not a situation where we've not given the person more than ample time to render the property safe. And there has been requests for continuance in the past. So it may be a legitimate request.
That we have granted.
We've granted. And like I said, we're willing to grant this as long as we're not continuing a dangerous condition for an additional period of time. So, and he's not the only owner. His wife is also an owner, so it's not that he needs to be here. He could have a representative, he could have his wife come. So there are other, in the past, if the court recalls, there was a construction manager who was here. So other people have attended these hearings with him. So he's not the only person who can come to a hearing, and this one's actually a pretty simple issue as to what's remaining. So I would recommend that the board really kind of establish 2 dates so that we don't have to come back to the board. So we establish the work session date, which is
June 27th.
I'm sorry, I'm already moving into July. June 27th at 8 o'clock, if we can get the property rendered safe. And then otherwise, if we can, then it can be extended to the July 11th board meeting. If we can't, it will stick to that June date, June 27th date, I think is the best way to do it for all parties. Gives him an opportunity to have his date that he wants, but also protects the public.
And he's responsible for rendering this property?
He is, absolutely.
I'm okay with that.
I am too.
I am also.
Give a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item I have is to award let me back up. As the board is aware, due to the flood damage, due to a sprinkler system freezing and busting in our Arts Center back on Christmas Day, unfortunately, we just recently put the project out to bid, received 1 bid, given the construction climate it is today. Everyone's busy, and I'm just fortunate that we had 1 bid, frankly. And unfortunately, the bid came in about 8% over estimate, which is still within our 10% window that allows us to award the bid, which obviously, given the fact that we have 1 bid, I recommend that we do accept this bid. And it's with Schrudy and Zimmerman at $835,000. And remember that a significant portion of this work is to be paid for by our property insurance carrier, given the damage was caused by the bursting of the sprinkler system. So with that being said, I guess what I'm asking for is a motion to award the bid to Schrudy and Zimmerman in the amount of $835,000, and then authorize the administrator to enter into a contract with Schrudy and Zimmerman for the same pending final legal review.
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Lastly, from an action item standpoint, we have an addition to the approved caterer list for the Grove Banquet Center. It looks like we have Lish's Perfect Dishes at 6211 Hamilton Avenue. And Laura, I'm assuming you've had a chance to review this?
We're actually awaiting one license, so if we could approve this pending final legal review as well, that would be helpful.
There you have it. So if we could have a motion pending final legal review.
So moved.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Looking at the personnel update, we had 3 resignations in the fire department, which we typically do, involving part-time employees moving on to different positions or full-time positions elsewhere. First, we had Patrick Clendenin, part-time EMT firefighter, Matthew Leeper, part-time medic firefighter, and Kenneth Mitchell, part-time medic-only position, all resigned in late May, early June. In the police department, we had the promotion of Amanda Estes to dispatch manager. We had the resignation of Nathan Fornash, police officer, and the new hire of Sean Wright, police officer. In Public Works was a fairly busy month. Scott's been busy filling positions. We had the hire of Vincent Washam, seasonal laborer, the hiring of Ty Brenner, part-time laborer, the hiring of Rick Riggs, full-time laborer, hiring of Brian McDowell, part-time 1820 laborer, and Anthony Litzinger, full-time laborer, hired June 5th. So fairly busy. I think they're all working out really well, right, Scott? Good, good. And as I mentioned last month in a more informal way, we did have the promotion of Scott Chardine to Director of Public Works. So congratulations, Scott, well earned, and I look forward to seeing what you do with that department. So he is taken over the ship, and I'm not going to say turmoil, but it's been difficult given the abrupt resignation of our previous director and a lot of the projects that we have going on and the staffing issues and things, and Scott has handled those issues beautifully and has allowed me to sleep a little better at night than I would have otherwise, so I do appreciate that. Thanks, Scott. In the Arts Center, we had the resignation of Shannon Johnson and the resignation of April McKinney, and then we had the hiring of Morgan Fraley as a bartender in the Grove Banquet Center. That concludes the personnel update. And Kathleen, would you mind taking care of Kim's community events and programs?
I don't know that I can do it with as much sparkle, but I'll try.
Probably not. We
No,
would never
probably
expect
not. So Kim has a lot happening this summer, starting June 16th, which is this Saturday. There is a concert from Second Wind back at the green space behind this building here from 7 until 10 o'clock. June 21st, next Wednesday, is the kickoff event for the update to our comprehensive master plan. That is at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, June 21st, up at the Winton Center Auditorium at Winton Woods. June 23rd, which is next Friday, is the Touch a Truck event. So there's lots of neat vehicles that are here. Public Works, police, fire vehicles, but vehicles from all over the region available for kids and kids at heart to view. That's from 11 to 1 o'clock, June 23rd. Again, behind the Township Administration Building. And then finally, July 7th is Blues, Brews, and Barbecue from 7 to 10 p.m. I think, again, here behind the Township Administration Building.
Thank you, Kathleen.
One question on the master plan update. This says 6 o'clock. I had 6:30. Is it at 6?
I do believe it is 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock p.m.,
Okay.
Wednesday the 21st.
And then one other thing, I think you mentioned the June 16th Second Wind concert. You said Saturday. It's actually Friday.
Did I say Saturday? I'm sorry, Friday. See, I tried to fill in for Kim, but those are big high-heeled shoes to fill.
Thank you.
Thank you. The board, lastly, the board has copies of the departmental activity reports. So unless there are any questions of those, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Okay, next, we have several resolutions on our agenda tonight. First is resolution number 47-2023, resolution approving text amendments related to illuminated signs in the Springfield Township zoning resolution.
So moved.
Seconded?
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Resolution number 48-2023, approving an application for a zone map amendment from R4 Multiple Family Residence District to RPUD Residential Plan Unit Development and approval of preliminary development plans. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Resolution number 49-2023, declaring motor vehicles located on public or private property in Springfield Township, Hamilton County, Ohio, to be junk motor vehicles pursuant to RC 505.173, and ordering the removal of such vehicles pursuant to resolution number 80-2012 and RC 505.871. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 50-2023, authorizing private sale of unneeded and unfit for use property in the police department. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 51-2023, authorizing sale by internet auction of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property in the police department. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 52-2023, authorizing disposal or salvage of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property in the police department. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next is resolution number 53-2023, declaring nuisances pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 505.87 at various listed properties within Springfield Township and authorizing statutory actions necessary to abate the nuisances. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
And finally, we have resolution number 54-2023, establishing assessment for abatement of nuisance and certifying same to the Hamilton County Auditor. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Burning.
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Is there any old business before the board?
No.
I do not have any.
Is there any new business before the board?
No.
Not this evening.
Next on our agenda is, the portion of our agenda is citizen participation. If there's anyone here this evening that would like to stand and address the board, please come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record. Seeing that there are none, I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.